Spring settled gently across the mountains, softening the sharp edges of winter until the last patches of snow clung only to the highest cliffs, and as the warm wind carried the scent of pine and blooming wildflowers, Alara woke each morning in Colt's cabin with a sense of peace she hadn't known in years, though part of her still feared that peace was too fragile to last, because life had a way of testing the brave and breaking the unprepared, and she knew the world beyond the valley wouldn't stay quiet forever. But for now, she let herself savor each dawn as sunlight streamed through the wooden shutters and Colt moved around the cabin with easy, grounded strength, his footsteps familiar, his presence steadying her like gravity itself, and she found comfort watching him chop wood in the clearing or brush down the horses, his sleeves rolled up, the muscles in his arms flexing with each movement, the sight stirring a warmth in her that no winter storm could have put out, and yet beneath her calm, she sensed Colt carried shadows too, memories he had buried beneath layers of silence and rugged independence, for sometimes she caught him staring into the distance with a look that spoke of old wounds and deeper battles, but he never spoke of them, and she wouldn't push until he was ready, though she prayed one day he would trust her enough to let her into the parts of his past that held him hostage. And as the days lengthened, they settled into a rhythm of shared chores and unexpected moments, like Colt teaching her to plant early crops in the thawing soil, their hands brushing as they worked rows side by side, or Alara surprising him with a repaired saddlebag she had stitched by lamplight, his grateful smile lighting her soul like a sunrise, or the two of them laughing breathlessly when the horses escaped their corral and forced them into a clumsy chase through the meadow, Colt eventually catching her around the waist as they fell into soft grass, their breaths mingling, their hearts thundering with something louder than laughter, yet each time the closeness pressed too deeply, Colt would shift, pull back just slightly, as if fighting an invisible line he wasn't sure he deserved to cross, and one evening, as the sky streaked in gold and violet, Alara finally asked what haunted him, her voice soft but persistent because she knew love could not bloom fully where secrets were rooted, and Colt sighed, running a hand through his hair as he confessed in a low, gravel-edged voice that years ago he had been engaged to a woman named Mara, a bright-spirited girl from the valley town below, someone he had loved in the truthful, unguarded way young men do. But one winter night bandits had raided the wagon he was traveling with, and despite fighting with every ounce of strength he hadn't been able to protect her, her death leaving a wound that hardened him into the solitary mountain man he became, and he told Alara he had sworn never to let himself love again because the burden of failing someone he cared about was heavier than any storm, and hearing his voice crack beneath the weight of the past made Alara's heart ache with a fierce tenderness as she reached for his hand and said, "You didn't fail her. You were outnumbered, ambushed, you did all a man could do." But Colt shook his head, tormented by guilt, and she stepped closer, brushing her thumb over the back of his hand, grounding him with warmth as she whispered, "You're not alone anymore. And you are not destined to lose everyone you love." And that night something shifted between them, the barrier Colt had built over years beginning to crumble under the gentle persistence of her compassion, yet just as their hearts began to open fully to each other, trouble arrived in the valley, as bad things often do when life finally becomes good, because a new gang had been cutting through the mountain trails, raiding travelers and stealing horses, led by a ruthless outlaw named Rourke Dalden, a man with a scar slicing down his cheek and a reputation for cruelty as cold as winter itself, and when word spread that Rourke's gang had claimed the pass as their own, demanding tolls, taking hostages, burning supply wagons, Colt's jaw tightened with a storm he thought he'd buried, for he recognized the gang's name, the same group responsible for Mara's death years ago. And when the news reached them, a fire lit in Colt's eyes, a mix of fury, grief, and justice long overdue, and Alara saw him sharpening his knife beside the fire that night, saw him checking his revolver, saw him preparing himself for a danger he had hoped never to face again, and she begged him softly, "Don't go after them alone," but Colt said in a low, quiet voice, "I can't let them hurt anyone else. Not again," and though fear squeezed her heart, she refused to let him walk into danger without support, insisting she ride with him, that they face whatever came next together. But Colt shook his head, not out of dismissal, but out of love, because the thought of losing her the way he'd lost Mara nearly broke him, and the two argued gently but with rising emotion until Alara, trembling but resolute, said, "You saved my life in that storm, Colt. Now let me help you save others," and though his instinct warred against it, he finally nodded, recognizing the same fierce courage in her that had drawn him to her from the beginning, and at dawn the next morning, they saddled their horses, hearts pounding as they descended from the safety of the cabin into the wild world waiting below, sunlight catching on the holster at Colt's hip and on the determined fire in Alara's eyes, and together they tracked Rourke's gang through rugged cliffs and sparse woodland, following signs of disturbed brush and abandoned campfires until they found a ravaged wagon beside the trail, still smoking, with a young couple hiding in fear, telling Colt and Alara that Rourke had taken their horses and threatened to return for more, and hearing this filled Colt with the steady, unstoppable resolve of a man who had nothing left to fear except repeating old mistakes, and as they pushed deeper into outlaw territory, Alara surprised him with her bravery, calm under pressure, sharp-eyed, refusing to shy from danger, and Colt felt pride swell in his chest as he realized that she was not just someone he needed to protect, but someone who made him stronger, someone who filled the hollow spaces of his life with purpose, and by the time they reached the gang's hideout, a cluster of rough cabins at the base of the ravine, Colt could feel Alara's presence at his back like a promise, and together they confronted the outlaws in a tense standoff, Colt calling out Rourke by name, his voice echoing through the valley as Rourke emerged with a mocking grin, recognizing Colt as the man who had escaped their ambush years ago, and the two circled each other like wolves, tension sharp as a blade, until gunfire shattered the quiet and chaos erupted, the outlaws firing wildly, but Alara stood firm beside Colt, her hands steady as she helped hold them back, their strength doubling because their fear was not for themselves but for each other, and the battle raged until dust and smoke blurred the world and only the strongest remained standing, Colt wrestling Rourke to the ground in a brutal fight years in the making, punching through every memory that had haunted him, every nightmare he'd relived, until at last